Oh, hey, thanks for clicking back on my channel. Things always seem to be so busy, I never really have time to do what I really want to do. One of the reasons and one of the things I love, and one of the reasons I started this channel, was really sharing that joy of learning. So, talking to experts is a great way to learn, having the panels, but there's so much more out there for us to access. There are books, field notes, scientific papers, and studies, all available for us to read, most of which are for free. And since you're here, I'm going to share what I've been reading lately in this new segment, Story Time with Steve. That's me. This paper comes from Dr. Zach Loafman, a professor at West Liberty University and former panelist on this channel. I'm reading his paper, Utilization of Natural History Information in Evidence-Based Herpetoculture, a proposed protocol and case study with Hydrodynastes gigas, the false water cobra. So let's check out an early passage of what I'm reading. Introduction. Herpetoculture. The maintenance and breeding of amphibians and reptiles in human care has a long history in both zoological institutions and the private sector. Bateman's The Vivarium is considered by many to be among the first English language publications providing guidelines for amphibian and reptile keeping. Though several German publications predated Bateman, The Vivarium and Bateman's writings provided a foundation for what later would be deemed herpetoculture, once captive breeding became a focus. When discussing enclosure design, Bateman promoted naturalistic approaches specific to the species in human care. Interestingly, the practice of including nature in vivarium design, today known as naturalistic keeping, would fall out of favor in the future in certain herpetocultural circles. During Bateman's time, herpetoculture was rarely practiced outside of zoological or academic institutions. That would change in the next 200 years. In the last 30 years of the 20th century, amphibians and reptiles gained in popularity as pets in the private sector. Care for these animals today varies from scientifically mediated approaches to methods that lack any scientific backing. A review of 1980s and 1990s herpetocultural literature indicates that for many species, a set of husbandry norm was applied to entire taxonomic groups, becoming husbandry dogma. A spectrum from minimalist approaches of early zoos and select private hobbyists to naturalistic designs promoted by Bateman and other group of private hobbyists existed in these guides. Diversity in temperatures, food types, enclosure types, and other husbandry attributes were often lacking. Over the past century, increased consideration of animal welfare has led to awareness of animals' needs in human care. Much of these improvements have focused on mammals and birds, which are perceived as more intelligent than amphibians and reptiles. Amphibians and reptiles only recently have received attention in this arena, demonstrating that they too are capable of play behaviors, can be trained using operant conditioning, and need complexity of care equivalent to many mammals and birds to survive captivity. This being said, minimalist keeping still permeates much of herpetoculture today, just in different forms. The question is this minimalist approach justified? Minimalist mindsets enable keepers in both the private and zoological sectors to maintain large collections and reduce spaces. Rack systems, where plastic tubs are used as enclosures and maintained in a drawer system with heating controlled via a thermostat, appeared in the 1970s and 1980s and are utilized for various reasons, including, but not limited to, rearing offspring, use as quarantine enclosures, and permanent housing for adult animals. Private herpetoculture utilized racks that are associated with the husbandry of several species readily bred within the private sector, like Eublepharis macularius, leopard geckos, and Python regius, royal or ball pythons. And several zoos utilize racks for off-exhibit caging. Their use has proven controversial due to perceived welfare issues, specifically their limited space and the lack of illumination inside. Wow. So there's a lot there, and there's a lot more to read. That's just the first few paragraphs, and there's a number of different pages to go on here. And it's really good stuff. I've read it before, but I was reading it again because most of the stuff you got to take a little extra time to digest. But the coolest thing about it is a good paper is going to have sources all the way through it. You didn't see me. The one thing I like that Dr. Loafman does is he just numbers the citations. So you go through and you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just in the short period of terms that I went to, we're already down to like 20. He's got 20 sources in just the first opening page. And it's a great way to then just click on those sources or look them up, and now you can find different papers that Dr. Loafman was referencing. And it's just this beautiful little rabbit hole of information. So next time you're on a Facebook group and someone wants to talk to you about, the welfare of animals, you're like, oh, I read something on that. As opposed to, I saw something on that, or my anecdotal evidence of the animal sitting right behind me tells me this. Real experts have written real expert opinions and they've put them down and they're all out there. So instead of spreading the BS that everyone spreads, you can actually become knowledgeable and I don't want to say become an expert. You really should do some school and it takes lots of years for that, but at least say what the experts are saying. So do yourself a favor. I'm going to post the link to this article inside the comments of this video, and you should definitely check out more of it. Read the whole thing. And yes, he uses Hydrodynastes gigas, the false water cobra, as his sort of specimen and study. But this approach is really all about understanding natural history and using that to apply for the care of our reptiles. So many reptiles, for instance, the Brazilian rainbow boa is behind me. You can just go by a care sheet, and I can't tell you how many times someone says, oh, well, I found varying information online. And that's true, because there's folk husbandry, which is just husbandry of what you hear from Jim Bob on the internet, and then there's actually utilizing natural history. And what natural history is what are these animals doing in the wild? Okay, do they live in trees? Do they live in burrows? Is it hot? Is it cold? Do they have periods of estivation or brumation? Are they active year-round? Are they diurnal hunters? Are they nocturnal hunters? Do they bask open in sunlight? All of these questions can be answered by people studying these animals in the wild with their natural history. So this is the first article I started reading. I wanted to share. I don't know. It's a new little segment I wanted to start. Right, I do a little bit of reading of what I find to be really interesting stuff. And excuse me if I butcher some of the Latin names and stumble over some of the words. That's a part of it, and that's why I'm reading this article for the second time already. It can be difficult, especially when they are riddled with sources. I read a paper that was telling the difference between super dwarf reticulated pythons and mainland reticulated pythons, and from various different island chains, and it's talking about DNA researching and all the studies that have come before, and really in-depth scientific stuff along with in-depth sourcing right in the text of the paper. It takes a minute to get around. So do yourself a favor. Don't read this on the phone while you're sitting on a bus headed to work or driving. Give yourself time to sit down and read it. Go slow, digest the words, and really learn something. I think Dr. Loafman's is a great entrance because, one, it's packed with valuable information and a really good guide for how you should care for the various species that you can keep, regardless of what the folk husbandry is telling you. It tells you how to utilize natural history in terms of caring for your reptiles, which is just, it's so obvious when you say it out loud, but it's so uncommon. So many people take pet store advice, and there's so much more to it. And this is just, I think, a really great article that, one, anyone that wants to keep a reptile should utilize, particularly snakes and the common stuff sold in pet stores that is usually given such bad information. But two, it's a great primer into just reading the scientific papers that can be difficult to read if you're not a university student or a master or a doctorate level graduate. Clearly, I struggle with the English language. So check it out. If you guys like this type of segment, let me know. Leave a comment, like it, subscribe it. I'm going to do more of them if you like it or not, but give me feedback so that I can improve on it. Anyways, that's it for today. I'm going to finish reading this. I've probably got about 25 more minutes to read, and it's good exercise for your brain anyways. If you don't read this, read a good book, but come back and read something every day if you can. All right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed learning something. I'll see you for the next panel, which I promise we're going to have real soon. Take care.